This is Antic, the Atari 8-Bit Podcast. I'm Kay Savitz. Robert Moore and Paul Rother were two of the founders of Hybrid Arts, along with Frank Foster and Alan Hart. Hybrid Arts created the MIDIMate, hardware that added musical instrument digital interface capability to the Atari 8-bit computers, and various software for it, including MIDITrack. Hybrid Arts continued on to make a wide variety of MIDI and music software for the Atari ST, which had built-in MIDI, including EasyTrack. Paul was the programmer, Robert was the music and sales person, and Frank Foster was the marketing person. Frank couldn't make it to this interview due to scheduling issues, but he'll be in my next interview. This interview took place on January 18th, 2024.
A musical family, and also around computers. I've been around computers since 13. My first computer program was an IBM 1620 when I was like 18 years old, so it was a few years later. But like IBM 1620s, the core memories are these big giant cores. They're big, and there's wires run through them, and by the signals through the wires change the magnetism of the cores, and that generates a radio signal. So if you put a radio on top of the computer, you can actually program a sequence through the cores and make electronic music. So that was kind of my first exposure or first experience doing electronic music. And then, I like in high school and grade school, I recorded all my friends. I did a lot of music. I was in little bands, that sort of thing. So I was always around tape recorders and microphones. And when I ended up finally at Evergreen, I started designing microcomputer systems to do electronic music, and I sent you a copy of that paper that I published. It was called A Hybrid Synthesizer, where it was I designed four synthesizer voices using actually the 555 timer. Paul knows the timer. And followed by an ADSR, which I can control the dynamics of the tone from that. And I had an Intel 4004 microcomputer that I designed that controlled four voices, four different synth parts. And then I presented a paper at AES, the Audio Engineering Society in LA, in May '76 on that system that I designed and built. So that was kind of like my first actually building stuff, and actually designed I called it a digital metronome when I was in college. It has a little built-in speaker, volume control, tempo control, and a headphone jack. And
It's
the
a
idea was
little black box in a project case. It's got two knobs and an output.
Yeah,
and yeah, all right.
Yeah, it was all handmade, and I actually used it was a Tektronix scope. It had I forgot what the display the material was called, but it was a green phosphor. And when you'd write a computer program and it would write to the screen. And I actually designed the circuit board for this guy using that screen. So I photographed the screen, and then I took the photograph, the negative, to a sensitive PC board, placed it on top of that, exposed it to light, etched away the background, and it left the traces for the circuit board, and
Wow.
that's what's inside this. It has my name on it and the date and all that.
Was that
And
the state of the art way to etch to make a film for etching, or was that like crazy? Because it seems nutty to
that was just
me.
something I did. I'd
Wow.
never
Yeah.
heard about it before, but
Yeah.
etching was common, like
Sure.
using some photographic process, but now using a computer.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
would you draw on the you'd use rulers and whatever else and draw
That's what I've
on
heard of
the
it that done that way, but not
board.
with putting it up to
Yeah, I did a
display
circuit
screen.
board as well using
Yeah,
not computer graphics, but just like
yeah,
drawn, and that's how they did it back then. Single-sided board.
yeah.
You could.
And then Evergreen ended up buying a couple of my digital metronomes. So that was my first, people will buy this stuff, And but anyway, Frank Foster, I met Frank Foster there because I was actually there as kind of had three majors, music, technology, and film. And I actually was first hired by I was working at Boeing's before that as an engineer aide and writing programs in Fortran to do computer modeling. And I came up with that too. They actually didn't have computer modeling when I was there, but I wrote these programs. The engineer said, "Hey, wait a second, can you do this?" And so I started writing Fortran programs to do computer models, tail section for Boeing 7X7, which is the 767. And so it came down to Evergreen. I was going to go to University of Washington, and it came to Evergreen. My brother said, "You got to go check out Evergreen. It's a great recording studio." I went there. There's a great recording studio at Evergreen State College. And I also went over and visited with the computer science department, and they hired me. They said, "Hey, why don't you just come work for us?" So I didn't go to University of Washington. I ended up going to Evergreen. And when they invited me to become a student there as well, to make a film about the computer, like a documentary about the computer science department. And that's how I met Frank. I was involved in film projects there. Frank was doing a computer film festival at the college, and that I designed my microcomputer system, control 4 voices. Later, I controlled lasers for Frank with that same system. And I also, Red Devil hired me to contract me to design our automation system to do automated fireworks. And then came down to LA, started working in recording studios, lots of big projects. I mean, I worked in some of the best recording studios in LA, Cherokee, Kenyon Village, on projects as an technician and an engineer and some production, but projects that were included Michael Jackson, Duran Duran, Cheap Trick, Devo, Rod Stewart. And the last studio I worked at was at Motown, and I would spend time at Berry Gordy's house. He had a Chroma Polaris, Rhodes Chroma Polaris, which is at the time wasn't called a Rhodes, it was called a Chroma Polaris. And it was connected to an Apple II computer through this big giant, PC board. And I'm thinking, there's got to be a better way to do this. But my goal since Evergreen, well, even before Evergreen, was to use computers to do music. I always wanted to replace tape machines with computers because, I mean, my experience with tape is like, rewind, fast forward, locate, now I got to edit this, you cut the tape or whatever you do, overdubs and all that. I just wanted to replace that whole process. And so at Motown is when I actually started developing the idea. And I told Paul about it. And Paul goes, Paul's going to have to, refresh my memory, but Paul became interested and became the first programmer.
Bob, let me give my background before you start talking about me.
Sure. Well, let me go on. So let me just finish up. So anyway, I met Frank at Evergreen, and then Frank and Paul and I ended up at Able Films. And then Alan Hart was a friend of mine. I don't know if you know the name Alan Hart, but Alan Hart was the first investor. He was the financier. He and I worked together at Cherokee Recording Studios. So I'd known Alan for a while, and he just had been paid overtime, like $20,000, and that's how we started Hybrid Arts, is with Alan Hart. And so the 4 of us became equal partners in the startup of that company. Anyway, off to you, Paul.
Well, I had a similar background to Bob's. I did not grow up in a musical family, but I grew up, phone freaking and, tape recorders and phones. And then I went to Fairhaven College, which is in Bellingham, which isn't too far away from Evergreen. Before that, I got involved with computers, programming computers, and there's never enough time to do computer graphics. It was all printouts and equations. So at Fairhaven, I found a computer and I did 2 films. I did one that was on CalComp plotters, and then another one using Textronics storage tube oscilloscope. That was a 2-minute movie, and so I ended up doing a travel study and found Bob Able Films in Los Angeles and got a job there, which was pretty amazing. So I moved from Bellingham down to Los Angeles. I've been here ever since. It wasn't long before I met Bob and Frank. And then as I mentioned earlier, there's another guy, Richard, that was part of our little clique of 4 guys. We all had Atari 800. So, and I think Frank, I'm not sure the exact sequence of events, but I ended up working for this laser company with Frank. It was all 8-bit technology using Z80s, and I was working with another company called Homer and Associates, which is again all Z80s and CPM, and a lot of electronics, so I learned electronics and you know how chips. It always seemed weird. It always seemed next to impossible that you could put these chips together. But once you learn how to do it, it's actually pretty easy. So so I learned all that, and with the laser, we did laser graphics. Laser Media became a premier laser company in the field, doing things with, I don't know, ELO and you name it, they did it. But so Bob and I hung out, and he came to me with this idea, and at the time, it was right when Roland, was it Roland that came up with a MIDI standard? And
Profit. There's sequential
Profit.
circuits.
Sequential circuits.
It was actually sequential circuits and Hewlett Packard. Like two engineers there were really into music and wanted to bring this technology, you know, to the world. And so that's
they came up with a MIDI standard, and Bob goes, "Hey, Paul, think you can make this work?" And so that's how it started with me and Bob. And we had I remember a card that went into one of the cartridges, and it had a UART on it, and then we were able to get the UART to translate the signals using opto isolators to MIDI, and I think we made something work. I don't know how far we went with that, but that was the time when you could read the schematics, read the technical info on a computer, and so I was doing that, and that's how we came up with the MIDIMate. Let's see.
You used the Atari because that's what you all had?
Yeah, we all had, the four of us all had Ataris. Well,
yeah, actually, to kind of go a little step before that, my experience was with an Apple computers, and my plan was to do the MIDI to using an Apple computer, because that was what I was working with for Barry Gordy at his house with the Chroma Player. So that's kind of what I was looking at. Paul was the one that said, "No, let's do Atari because it's a much better computer." I'm going, okay. So
I don't know about that, but I'm not sure why we settled on Atari.
I did not have an Atari computer.
I know, but we went to Atari to play games on it. I'm not sure why we did that, whether it was the superior game computer or not, but we all, the four of us all had Atari 800s, and so that's how that came about, because we played games on it, and it wasn't really set up for music. And so yeah, I said we did the card that fit in the slot, but that seemed kind of complicated. And then we figured out we could get the signals and get everything we needed from this connector, from the thing the big thing that goes in the side of the Atari,
the SIO, the serial input output.
Yeah. And we were able to make that work. And once we were able to make that work, we made the MIDIMate, which I have a prototype. Let's see if this will read. It's a little dim, but this is one of the original ones that Bob made. I probably specified it and Bob made it. And so
yeah, you spec'd it and I built it.
And so that's how that came about.
Can you hold it up one more time? I want to see the side with the plugs on it. I'm trying to get a screenshot here.
So that's one of the first handmade ones.
That's like
that's a prototype.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let me see if I can put more light on it. There you go. Let's see.
Higher up, please.
I'm having a hard time.
I know, it's all reversed. Nice.
Can you read that?
No, not really. What's it saying?
MIDIMate. This is Hybrid Arts MIDIMate, and it's a MIDI and sync on it.
Nice.
Anyway, nice. So I still have it. I collect stuff.
Here's mine, which is not a prototype.
Yeah, no, that's you got the right connector on the end. This has got some kind of D
yours is
9.
Okay, yours is plastic, right?
Yeah.
So
yes,
so the metal one.
The original, I got a metal. This is metal, yeah.
Yeah, this is the metal ones. I handmade these, the first 200 with Alan Hart. like I had to go all over town, all over the Los Angeles area. It was like all over the county. I found one place that would punch the holes for me, another place that would paint the box for me, and then I ordered all of the parts from another place, all these semiconductor, I mean, all the, whatever, the capacitors, resistors, all the parts from another place. And then I went to another place and I designed the circuit board, brought it to another place. They made the circuit board. They printed, they, punched out the circuit boards for me. And then I took all of that, the circuit board and the parts to another place that they did wave solder for those first 200 units. And then Alan and Hart and I handmade, hand assembled the first 200 units. So
wow.
the metal ones are all handmade by Alan Hart and myself. And then after that, when we sold those, we had enough money to go, have them, mass produced. Eventually, we went to China because there were just too many needs. We had too many,
So once we had the box together, this was kind of driven out of need. I guess Bob was thinking company and the future. I was just thinking, well, what do we need? So we did, the first thing was a sequencer called MIDITrack 2. And that was written in Forth, and we were able to have sync. I already done a crude form of time code for the laser people. So it's basically, I think, the same basic setup using the, I think it's called the Kansas City standard for cassette decks. And so you just record a sequence of 16-bit numbers, and then you sync it up. And anyway, it worked out really good. But that was all programmed in Forth, and I did whatever I could to keep it fast and efficient. And
yeah, Paul was the one that decided to do Forth. I don't know if Paul remembers, but I wrote the Gen Edit 600 version of Gen Edit, and our very first brochure, I had Frank come down to Motown and photograph. I had MIDITrack on one screen, the Paul version, like our very first brochure had MIDITrack, not MIDITrack 2, but MIDITrack and Gen Edit 600. And MIDITrack was the version that Paul had written. And Paul was the one that said, let's write this in Forth. And so I learned Forth programming language. And I wrote the Gen Edit 600 so that in that Motown, that first brochure, which I think I sent you a copy of that, if you look at that, in the background, there's like an Ampex ATR 124, like a $150,000 MIDITrack. And in the foreground, you see turns out to be a Yamaha DX7, the MIDIMate, an Atari 800 XL, and then above that, there's MIDITrack is on one screen, and on the other screen, you don't really see the other computer because they can't both display at the same time. On the other screen, a smaller TV monitor, you can see all the knobs and switches of a Prophet 600 on that small screen. And that's the program that I wrote. And there were two kind of like breakthroughs on that product that I designed. One is that's on a raster monitor. That's not on a graphics monitor. And how I got graphics was I actually designed a custom set of fonts, 4 fonts, 4 characters made up a knob or a switch. And I also, the other thing that I did, like that, this product never came to market because I just got too busy with other things to actually finish it. The other thing that I did too, though, and I still have the prototype, is I used a light pin to program the synthesizer. So you would touch the light pin to the screen, and you could control the settings of the knobs and switches of the Prop 600. So that first photograph was photographed at Motown. I was still working on Motown, and that's pretty much the last day at Motown.
Wow.
So yeah, and I did another product. What was it called? For the DX7 for a library program. That was pretty simple in comparison. But just so you know what I don't know how much you know about Forth, or your listeners know about Forth.
I think I could say me and my listeners know a little bit about it, but you can go.
Well, it was invented by this guy, Charles Moore, who I had the pleasure of working with, and I learned directly from him. It's very good on small machines. It's very good at multitasking, and it's very good for debugging. And it works like a Hewlett-Packard calculator, reverse Polish notation, and with the stacks and all that. So I was very comfortable with it, and that's why I used it. I'm not a fan of BASIC. In fact, I'm kind of the opposite of a fan. I avoid BASIC. It just teaches all the wrong things. And I know there's a lot of people out there that used it for gaming because that's what they had. And
Sure.
so the power to them. So that is a lot of my story with hybrid arts is
So how
they're
did
just
you
getting it going.
how did you sell those first 200 magazine ads, or were just word of mouth at that point, or?
Well, at that point, yeah, at the beginning it was at all the music stores. I walked around to all the music stores in LA, and then also visited music stores in New York, and in Texas, Chicago, and then made a lot of phone calls. I actually at one point carried the whole I actually carried the whole product. Once we first sold 200, I carried the whole system. I flew to New York and I had a meeting. I can't remember if it was Roland. I think it was with Roland in New York. Like I was on the 26th floor of this office building in New York City. And I actually, before that, I went down to some local computer store and bought an Atari 800. And I carried that whole system up to Roland and tried to convince them to license the product from us. So, just basically buy out the license of the product so that we make a bunch of money really quick, and then we could like reinvest into some more advanced products. And they said they liked the idea that this is really great, but it's kind of like they didn't quite understand what we were doing and quite how they would use it, and they were just too committed to their keyboards at that point. So it didn't work out. But yeah, no, I walked around and carried them all around, and then we did do brochures.
We
Frank
did shows too, right?
Right, yeah.
We
Yeah, we
weren't
did.
we at AES? I remember that.
Well, actually, the very first show, I mean, I've kind of looked online on see what people report about when the first time is MIDI was shown, and people say MIDI was first shown at NAMM in like '86, but it wasn't. I first demonstrated MIDI. I mean, I first called when I was first doing all this. I was talking to sequential circuits about their Prophet 600 and their MIDI. And on that guy, I can't remember what his name was, but that guy who was heading up that project asked me to call Hewlett Packard, the engineer at Hewlett Packard. So I spoke to the guy at Hewlett Packard, and they both said, "Hey, can you fly up and demonstrate your product to us?" This is in May 1983. This is I had just bought the Prophet 600 a few months before, and Paul and I had just the basic, the start of this system working. And so I first demonstrated, and how I know all of this, how I remember May '83, that's where I first met my wife too, who I'm married to. But she was my travel agent. She actually was the MUG, the MIDI user group, was the first MIDI user group that was founded by Hewlett Packard, the guy engineer at Hewlett Packard and the engineer at Sequential Circuits. And the May '83 was the first MIDI user group meeting. And they wanted me to showcase this product because nobody had done this yet. Like Paul and I were the first to have MIDI working on a personal computer and a music synthesizer, a Prop 600. And so I demonstrated in May '83. And then later in October '83, I was asked to demonstrate again at the Joe Goodman music. I forget what the show was called. I just spoke to Joe a week ago, and I can't remember what the name of the event was called, but was it Joe Goodman was he had a music tour called Goodman Music in Studio City, somewhere in that neighborhood. And he would every year hold this event. It's like the music professionals,
Yeah, that's the one I remember.
Show. Yeah, and so I demonstrated there, and that was crazy. We actually had a better working, we had like a working product. It's actually, you could use it.
That's where the Pointer Sisters found us, right?
Well, also, yeah, the first guy was Ray Parker Jr. And
right.
This crazy wild guy comes in and he goes, "Hey man, I just heard about your product. I really want to buy one. I'm going to buy this one." It's just a prototype. It wasn't really, ready for market, but I sold it to him, and he said, "Yeah, I've got this movie Ghostbusters I'm doing the soundtrack for, and I want to use it to do that." And then another crazy experience with celebrity musicians was, this is, we're still just, this is like October, November. We're still just kind of, working on this product. And I hear there's like this knock on my door, and it's Michael Pinder from Moody Blues, and he goes, "Hey, I just heard about your product. I'd like to use it on my." It's like, what? So like Moody Blues, and all these characters are like showing up, and we had a huge roster of like really great people
Because we
using
were
the product.
first and it worked really good.
Yeah, it worked great. Actually, one of the advantages, even later, like one of the great advantages was the sample rate the the MIDI notes, or the MIDI sequence itself, is a much higher rate than everyone else. And that's why musicians loved MIDITrack, because the reproduction of the keyboard playing and drums and whatever else was really accurate to what they were playing. Whereas other sequencers, they were something like a 16th per note, or 16th per frame accuracy, and we were like 192, or I can't remember what we were, just some crazy, high rate of testing, that it just reproduced their performance the way they wanted it. Yeah.
Nice. It, as an Atari person, it warms the cockles of my heart to know that Atari 800s were, for a minute, in the studios of all these famous musicians, putting
Right.
together their albums.
Yeah, I personally handed systems to John Anderson of Yes, Todd Rundgren. Yeah, I don't know if you know Todd Rundgren. The drummer. What's the drummer for Police? What's his name? I've forgotten his name.
Copeland?
Yeah, Stuart
Copeland.
Copeland. So, I mean, these guys would call me, and I'd make a deal with Atari. Atari provide the computer, and I would just, go to their house and show them how to use the product. So all those guys were, all those people are using it. This is the Atari 8-bit.
Yeah, I mean, because yes, everyone knows the ST and MIDI, and it was a huge thing for that. But I mean, we're still talking 8-bit days at this point.
Yeah, we're talking 8-bit.
Yeah.
So, and I remember doing the manual for MIDI too on a Mac. Back when the Mac, you had a floppy drive, and you're like swap the discs all the time. And I still have a copy of that manual somewhere. I didn't bring it out for this, but
nice. Okay, so it's early days. You're selling early units to famous musicians and that sort of thing. You sell your first 200, and then what happened next? Where did we go from there?
Well, the product became really popular. I mean, as far as 8-bit, I mean, in '86 we started developing for the Atari ST 16-bit. So 8-bit survived basically. I mean, even though the 8-bit was being sold while we were still selling the 16-bit systems, it was really only from 84 to 86, about 2 years.
The ST came out, and that was clearly the superior machine for as far as music went.
Yeah. Bob, can I interject? I started dropping out at this point. I was a company owner, but I stopped writing software. I went on to do other things. I don't know. 86 is when I did that Pink Floyd tour and other things. So, but we had other guys. Had Stephen come in, and he took my place, and he continued the tradition, and he ended up writing for the ST. And,
so up till this point, it sounds like, Paul, you were the software guy. Robert, you were the music guy, and maybe sales. Frank
took photographs and the like. And
Frank was marketing. Like I wanted to put together a company with with like really talented people, and so Paul Rother. Well, Alan Hart and I were first. Paul Rother joined in, once I had financing, and then I spoke to actually our friend Richard Scher, because he was great at sales, and I knew probably the most important job at our company, because I knew we were going to develop a great product. The next most important thing was sales and marketing, and so I actually spoke to Richard Scher, who was like a great salesperson, but he was interested, but he decided against it. And then that's when, I invited Frank in, and Frank did the marketing, and he produced the, photographed the, our ad campaign, and, did all the manuals and we all together, well, he and I together would produce trade show events, NAMM show. In '86, I flew to a music messa and demonstrated, our ST products there. And but up to that point, it was Paul, Alan Hart, myself, and Frank. That was the company in the beginning. And then, yeah, like Paul said, Stefan Daystrom. Like Paul got too busy with his other projects, and Stefan Daystrom. I don't know how Paul knew Stefan Daystrom, but you brought him in, right, Paul?
Through Laser Media, and we had that
right.
office on Olympic Boulevard, or just off
Right,
Olympic
yeah.
in Mississippi.
Yeah.
And Laser Media was right across the street, where
Yeah.
Frank and I both spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
It was kind of incestuous. There were all these different companies. It was an exciting time to be in LA. There was all this computer graphics going on, the lasers, the music. I was interested in all of it, and I only have so many hours in a day.
Yeah,
But it was definitely an exciting time.
Well, one of you guys, and it might have been Frank, in the last few weeks when we were kind of pre-talking, told me that you guys, you Hybrid Arts, convinced Atari to put MIDI into the Atari ST at all. Is that right?
I actually did have a meeting with Leonard Tremillo at Atari
Tell me about
to
that.
talk about that. Leonard was actually interested in licensing our technology, the Hybrid Arts technology, to add MIDI to their new computer. He couldn't really tell me what that new computer was just yet. It was the Atari ST, of course. And but after he realized how simple it is, I mean, the interface is really simple. It's an opto isolator, and in our case, a UART. In their case, it's just an opto isolator.
No, it didn't have a UART, Bob. It was just an opto isolator. That's what made it so simple.
Well, yeah, but the original our product, our MIDIMate, had a UART in it.
No. We're using the
Oh, okay. So, but originally we did. Oh, so the UART was with the Paralliner, the cartridge.
That was our first go, and it was
right. Yeah.
and it was way more efficient.
Right.
So the circuit board in this guy only has a couple components.
Right.
And
that's
anyway,
right.
Sorry to correct you and interrupt. But
no, that's fine. Yeah.
As Bob was saying, it was really simple. It's really simple to do MIDI. You just need an opto isolator, and the frequencies 32
so did Trammell decided he didn't need you? He could just do it. They could just do it on their own.
Well, I never heard back. Next thing I know, there's a MIDI on this new computer. But it was good because we actually, Hybrid Arts actually, just my opinion, Hybrid Arts kept Atari computers alive for its last 2 years. They were dying a quick death, but musicians loved Hybrid Arts products with the Atari computer. The Hybrid Arts products were unmatched in the industry, like just because of the accuracy and just the quality. And it was rock solid. All of our products are rock solid. There was never glitches or, hey, how come it played that? And, correcting your performance by quantize. There were lots of features within our product that competition couldn't quite do as well as us.
Why did you do it better? Was it because you had that extra 2 years of learning on the 8-bit, or?
That was just it was just our, this is the way we operate. Like Paul,
I was like the Steve Wozniak, and Bob was like Steve Jobs, and Bob would just keep coming at me with features, and I was a good programmer at the time. I still am, but so I was able to implement all this stuff and knew how to go about doing it.
Yeah, Paul's great. Paul is really good. Basically, like I said, I wanted to replace tape machines, so I kind of described to Paul, MIDITrack, punch in, punch out. I don't remember how we came up with
that's right. We had punch in, punch out. Yeah.
Yeah, we could, and plus it needs to be able to sync to tape, because my experience is working. And, I was probably the youngest, highest paid chief tech in the industry when I was hired by Seals and Crofts to be their technical manager. So my experience was, really high in recording studios, and, synchronize, like Devo. In Devo sessions, we had like 10 to 20 different machines, multi-track recorders all sunk up. So my experience is with synchronizing, tape machines, synchronizing lots of tracks. And so, that's why our product had on the tape interface. But Paul is definitely the great programmer. I just had lots of ideas. One of the other ideas, I think we were probably the first company in the world to offer online file sharing for musicians through our, I'd started up, at Evergreen, I was responsible for lots of computer projects. I maintained all of the computer terminals around the campus, and I was the computer for electronic music studio with the Buchla 200 4-channel synth, and so I had a lot of experience with computers and maintenance and internet and involvement in ARPANET, before internet. And I had, bulletin board services. And so one of the things I did at Evergreen is I set up the World Music, I think it was called MIDI World Music Bulletin Board, or BBS, MIDI World Music BBS. And it was that was like in '84, so that people could dial up into our bulletin board service. And I had libraries of sequences and sound patches and other information, so that musicians could actually, anywhere in the world, could dial up our BBS and download a library of music and perform their music set that evening. Like, our sequences would be a complete show, and they just have to sing to it or play their acoustic guitar.
Yeah, the DX7 was big back then, and having recordings, saving the patches. That there were actually people that made a living by developing patches and selling them.
Right. Well, that was the first thing was at Hybrid Arts. I knew I didn't want the company to start off being small. I didn't want just one product in the world. Go, hey, what? They've only got one product. Are these guys going to be around next year? And so I came up with all these ideas: MIDITrack, MIDI patch, session sounds, session players, and MIDICom. And session sounds and session player, those two products. Session sounds was a library. Like I, had a lot of musician friends in the industry, and I had, like one guy that was a, world-class, programmer for synthesizers. And so he created a whole library of really cool patches for me, and we sold those as session sounds. And that had other musicians that created these really great tracks of sequences for music sets, cover tunes, and we sold that as session player. And then MIDICom was the musician-friendly telecommunications software that worked with the Atari modem. And with MIDICom, a musician with no experience of computers, no knowledge of before internet, no knowledge of dial-up and all that, could use our software program called MIDICom, easily connect to our, and it's designed specifically for the BBS. They could easily connect to our BBS, and they'd have a really easy set of switches or buttons to touch on to select, music libraries or patches, or more information. There was also like a forum on there that people could ask questions and answer questions. So, I mean, that was kind of, we were kind of I think ahead of our time a little bit, it's before the internet. We're sharing stuff, and it's all Atari 8-bit computer.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, that's really the power of, of a, little computer, and a good team.
Amazing. Great.
So that's how it started, and then it grew.
Yeah.
How big did it get? I mean, this was always a private company, right? So it's
right.
It's hard to know. I mean, were you selling 1 million a year, 10 millions a year? I mean, how big were we getting?
Well, yeah, we were 1 million a year at the end, up to 2 million, but there were some complications in the I wasn't in the company at the very end, and there were some complications in the accounting that ended up resulting in the company shutting down.
So what happened was we were all in our early 30s, if not late 20s, and really none of us went to business school. We Bob's got a lot of great ideas. We had a lot of talent. We're doing things, but we didn't know how to run a business. So we got this guy Rainier, right, to run the company, and he did some things I think were unscrupulous. And then we had some other employees that didn't like what he was doing, and he got financing from T. Roy Price. Somehow talked them into giving us money, and then this rogue employee called up T. Roy Rice and said, "Hey, this company's fraudulent," or something. I don't know what the conversation was, but that was kind of the end of it. And at that time, we had the
none of us,
sampling
Paul,
software.
Frank, and I were none of us in the company at that time.
Yeah,
you guys had cashed out before then, and
Well,
Well, I don't know if they cash out, but I was able
no,
to. Reiner approached me and bought my share, so I actually did make some money out of it.
Mhm.
yeah. And I think Alan was still involved more than the
Right.
other three of us. So, what was the name of the sampler we had, Bob?
ADAP,
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 right?
ADAP.
And that
Yeah,
ran
yeah.
off Atari. I
Yes.
can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, once we got into the 16-bit, the company exploded as far as technologies and products. I mean, we went from what is that, 6 products to well over 30 different products. Digital audio, digital direct-to-disc recording systems, samplers. I mean, I use the ADAP itself to do, I don't know, hundreds of TV shows, including an Emmy nomination for work I did using ADAP on shows like Chicago Hope and Beverly Hills 90210. And there are a lot of people using the 16-bit products for like major feature films, like
Yeah, we had
Simpsons.
that office off National Boulevard that was like really hip.
Yeah,
At
yeah. The
the end.
Was the
company,
ADAP machine the thing that was in like a rack mounted system?
right?
Am I thinking of the right
Yeah,
thing?
yeah,
Yeah, all right.
yeah. Yeah, ADAP was very sophisticated. It was really good. And actually, how ADAP came to the company was, and this is a Frank Foster story.
What does that stand
We
for? ADAP?
well, it was a temporary name. I just call I call it the analog to digital audio processor. That's what ADAP stood for. And I mean, I was kind of toying with this product to do digital audio, and this fellow came to a NAM show in '85, NAM '85 in Anaheim, and Frank brings him over. I say, "Hey, Frank," I'm Frank brings him over to me. He says, "Hey, Bob, there's this fellow here. His name is Wendell Brown, and he has this company called Hippopotamus, and he wants us to distribute his product. Why don't you talk to him?" And so I spoke to Wendell Brown. I mean, it's like an 8. I don't know if you know about the hippopotamus sampler. It was really bad. It was a toy. It was really bad. And I told Wendell, well, no, I'm not interested in that, but I am interested. And I described ADAP to him with full SMPTE interface and it's direct to disk and sampler and all of these features. And he goes, I can do that. And so we put together a contract and signed a deal, and Wendell Brown actually did the development. I spec'd the product, and he developed the ADAP, which is a great product. I mean, I actually appeared on PBS Computer Chronicles. I don't know if you've seen that
Yeah,
video.
I watched that episode.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I appeared like one of the two guys in PBS Computer Chronicles is the founder of CP/M. I can't remember what the fellow's name was. He is the creator of
Gary
basically
Kildall.
yeah, Gary
Yeah.
Kildall.
You're
Yeah,
90%
yeah,
there.
yeah. Gary developed basically the first operating system for PCs,
Sure. Yeah.
and it was called CP/M.
Did Hybrid Arts ever actually have a PC product, or were you strictly Atari the whole time?
We had Mac and PC, but
Okay.
at that point it was kind of things were getting a little crazy
Yeah.
at Hybrid Arts. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, we actually did have the first Macintosh product was John Eidsvåg had designed he actually had designed the product before for the Ensoniq Mirage. I don't know if you know the Ensoniq Mirage. It's a sampling keyboard,
Yeah.
and again, this is 16-bit. This is not 8-bit. So he had a Mesos, it's like a edit system, and he approached me with that, and I asked him to rewrite it for Atari ST. So we actually did have, his Macintosh product, which we just were distributing for him, but also the version he made for us for. I mean, I like companies would hand me keyboards. Kawai handed me a K3 keyboard. Ensoniq Mirage handed me their keyboard. Prophet. I bought the Prophet 600. That's the only keyboard I've ever bought.
They wanted
But
you to make patches setups for them, and
yeah. Well, so we showcase our products at NAMM and different events around the world, and we would have huge lines. We'd have big crowds in front at our booths, and so these, and like Paul said, like we had Pointer Sisters were our like Mark Ritter and I've forgotten the other guy's name, Greg Welch, I think is his name, were the two keyboard players, the two music directors for Pointer Sisters, and they would come to our shows and perform live at our shows for us using our products. One other fun story too about Atari 8-bit was Kawai was really interested in our products, and I was able to put together a package with them that included and negotiated with Atari, Kawai, and then of course our company. So we actually bundled this whole Kawai. I forgot what the name of the package is called, but we bundled our products, MIDITrack, and we had a custom version of a Kawai editor, like on patch editor librarian, and so our product, MIDITrack, MIDIMate, this Kawai custom product, a Kawai keyboard, an Atari computer with display as one big bundled package.
Big turnkey system. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, it's like a musician could walk into a Kawai music store, just walk out the store with this complete, music system. This whole sequencer, like this whole composing system, probably cheap.
Neat.
And that was Atari 8-bit.
Nice. It's amazing. You either of you have any of this software anymore? I'm looking at Atari Mania. Some of the stuff has been archived. Some of it has not. Some of the more obscure things. And I'm wondering if you have any source code, any software, any disks, anything.
I probably have some floppy disks. Paul, I don't know if you have any, Paul?
Oh, I have floppy disks. Whether you can read them or not, it's a whole other question.
Well, I can. If anybody can read them, I can read them. If you can let me borrow.
I'll give them to you.
Right.
I have 8-bit. I have all kinds of. 8-inch floppies from other projects. I just
funny
floppies.
Send me floppies. We'll get the data off them, and I can handle.
They're kind of sorted by size.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I know you're fourth. I've dealt with fourth floppies too. It's a whole different thing, but we can get the data off there and see what you got.
Okay.
Beautiful. What about you, Robert? Maybe.
I don't really know what I might have. There were some products I was developing on my own, and they were never actually. Well, I did bring some to market. One of them was called Dramatics, which is I involved a friend of mine who was a drummer. Like he programmed Linn drum machines, and he was like a studio guy. He's like really good. And so I had him program an Alesis drum machine. So this is after Atari 8-bit, is still starting to get into 16-bit, and he programmed sequences into like drum patterns into an Alesis drum machine, and then I would just record those to a cassette tape, and then I have that cassette tape mass produced, duplicated, and I had this really cool package called Dramatics, your drum sequence right here. Buy it today. Another thing I did too, this is also not Atari 8-bit, but after I left, I did probably the first all digital soundtrack for feature film, and it was mixed at 20th Century Fox at the Xanax stage on the studio lot, and the director of the sound department there was the lead mixer for that mix. It was a feature film from a company called New World Pictures. It was their last film, and I think they became Lionsgate. Anyway, he really liked. Like I had done all of the sound for that using ADAP, and he really liked what he heard, and so he asked myself and the supervisor on that project to move our company onto the lot, which we didn't have a company, but we formed a company and moved on to the Fox Studios lot. And one of the first things I did was I made a deal with Reiner at Hybrid Arts to OEM me the ADAP, and I repackaged the ADAP into a product I called a DM1, Digital Moviola. And it was like a full rack case, like a road case that had, front and back doors you close, and you could roll it around to wherever you needed to go and do gigs. It was a digital moviola, but it was all digital, no film. It was all, you just record all the sounds into it. It had a full SMPTE interface. It had speakers. It had everything built in. You just open it up and start working. And we sold, I don't know, 5 or 10 of them. But the guy that I partnered with to do the manufacturing, he really flaked out. He unfortunately just stopped doing it. But we sold like 10 at like 50 grand a piece. So that was pretty cool.
Nice.
Hybrid Arts products, yeah. But yeah, I personally did a lot of work with ADAP for feature films, and there were a lot of people did, like all the Simpsons, for up until, you know, I don't know how long ago, 10 years ago or so, we're all done with ADAP, the dialogue. It was all cut on the Sony Studio slot with using ADAP.
Wild.
And I actually did, when I was on the Fox lot, before Simpsons became its own film, its own TV series. It was on, Paul, what was the name of that show?
Tracy Ullman.
Tracy Ullman. It was on Tracy Ullman show. I was on the Fox lot, and I was doing a lot of work for Fox projects. And one of the projects was this new show. It's going to be called The Simpsons. And they brought it to me and asked me to do to do the sound for this promo reel that they wanted to start pitching around. So I did, using ADAP, did the sound for the, the Simpsons, how it starts off, dun, 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 that whole thing. I did all the sound for that, for the first promo version. That, I don't think they end up using what I did, but it was just used to start promoting the show. Yeah. Well, I didn't do any of the music though. I just did the sound effects. Little skateboard of him flying across and the car sliding up and all the sounds and the, tings and dangs and all the noises. And I did all the sounds. I didn't do the music, but it was I just did the very first version of that they then used to promo. And then they ended up hiring, I've forgotten who they ended up hiring to do the sound, but they hired somebody
else. That would have been 87,
I think, right? Yeah, something like that. Nice. No, that was like in 89, maybe 90. Because I moved onto the Fox lot at the at the end of 88. I did that feature film at the very December 88. And I was,
what film was that? Did you say?
88. It was called Angel's Egg. Or no, was it called? I forgot what it's called. It was just some feature film. It was like I said, the last film for New World Pictures. It was called, I think originally it was called Angel's Egg. What they had done, Carl Copera, who started a company called Cineville, that was like his last project at New World. He directed it, and he had arranged to buy this Japanese anime. And then he shot live footage and intercut the Japanese anime. It's like the end of the world, it's the end of the world. And there's like this guy who's running around with this, big suit and mask and, air filters. And there'd be these cuts. I don't even understand what the story was about. It made no sense to me, but they would intercut between this Japanese anime and this live guy, and somehow there was this interaction, but I did all the sound effects for that.
Paul, what haven't I asked you about the Atari days that I should have?
I just remember the four of us, Richard, Frank, Bob, and I, playing our Ataris. We had that in common. And I forget what games we played, which were the big ones back then.
Well, we spent a lot of time at the arcade in Westwood too.
Yeah, that was before Atari. We spent a lot of quarters there.
All right.
Space Invaders.
Yeah. And what are you doing? What do you do today, Paul? What do you do these days?
I'm pretty retired, but I still stay active. I program Arduinos and Raspberries to a certain extent, and I was telling Bob, I just got my my autofill in the pool, which uses Arduino and tracks it to the internet and all this stuff. Working because I just improved the Wi-Fi. So that's what I do. I do things, and then I help my wife a lot, just accounting kind of things with her clinic that she runs.
All right, Robert, same questions for you. Tell me something about the Atari days that I haven't asked about yet.
Not Not much. There's not much to add other than just doing trade shows. Those are really fun. But otherwise, I think we kind of covered all. I mean, I sent you that little write up that kind of covers it all too. That's like a lot of detail.
I can share
I
that,
sent you
right?
that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can
yeah,
I?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you do today?
Work. Well, I kind of do a number of things. I have 15 apps in the Apple Store. As kind of a side gig. It's really fun. I mean, me, it's art and technology. And I do apps is really a hobby. It's really my art form. And I have 15 apps up there now. There's like 44 up there in different stages of review. But they're kind of all over the place, games to film production to whatever else. I've been working as an engineer as well for film and TV production, post-production engineer. Like one of the shows I built was TMZ. A lot of these companies, they have a hard time getting this technology to work for film and TV. Like in 2000, for example, Apple was hired by a company called Cimarron Group to build Apple wanted to have their 16, it was like, I think 16 or 17 Final Cut Pros connected to a 5 terabyte SAN storage and with Avids and Pro Tools all in this one facility. And they couldn't figure out how to get it to work. They couldn't play video. And they found out about me. The Cimarron Group found out about me and hired me to basically do what those guys couldn't do.
Okay, I want to add that when we started Hybrid Arts, it was a very exciting time, both and to be in Los Angeles. I kind of mentioned that, but there was computer graphics going on, and all these people were just into doing it for the fun of it. Same thing with music. Right. It was just MIDI was just starting. I worked for a laser company. And it was just a great time to be young and alive in technology in Los Angeles.
Right, yeah.
It's very exciting.
Great. Last question. I'll ask you, Paul, first, since you have to go. If you could send a message to the people who are still playing with their Atari computers today, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
Well,
yeah, there are people still using 8-bit and 16-bit.
Yeah, it's exciting. You can understand it all. It's so computers these days are so complicated. That's why I like the Arduino. Just read the schematic, read the operating system. You can actually do that with the Atari. Read what's on the chips and maximize it. Learn Fourth because that's a whole different way of thinking. It makes Fourth makes C and Basic and Pascal all look the same. Yeah.
Well, for me, I use a combination of my iPhone, my iPad, and GarageBand and in-app audio apps, and then do basic tracks and then move it all to Logic Pro X on my Mac to finish songs. So I'm kind of like I don't do Atari 8-bit stuff though, but I think it's pretty cool. Like when you were first talking about doing this podcast, I did some research and I found there's all these people are actually still using the Atari 8-bit and 16-bit to do music. It's pretty amazing. It's great.
Yeah. No, there's
one guy. Do you know about this one guy? There's one guy. He actually has M.2 drives working with his Atari ST.
No, that's no. The thing I was going to ask you about, if you knew about the Roland MT32 emulator, which is a thing you can take a Raspberry Pi and turn it into a full Roland synthesizer emulator.
Oh, wow.
I did that. I made one, little screen and everything, hooked it up to my MIDIMate and my Atari, and then I had the Atari, pushing track songs to the Raspberry Pi, and it sounds just like an old Roland machine. It's great.
Right. Do you know about AudioKit? Those guys?
Mm-mm.
They offer freeware for iPhone, iPad, and they have all of it. They have like Roland drum machines. They have DX7s. They have them all emulated. It's pretty amazing, and they're
Nice.
interop audio, meaning that you can actually from within GarageBand on your iPhone or your iPad, you can use that as a sound source. Use that app as a sound source within GarageBand, so you can lay down a track. And it records the output of that app into GarageBand, and then you can move that to Logic Pro X on your Mac to finish it, like do a full professional mix.
Nice, amazing.
Okay, I'm ready to exit.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
Out of here.
Okay. Paul, I will email you about the floppy disks. Thank you for your time.
Okay, you're welcome.
Right, bye.
See you,
Bye-bye.
Paul.
Bye, Bob.
Thanks, Kay. That was great fun.
Thank you
If you
both.
have any more questions, if you have any more questions, feel free to, email or call or whatever.
Great.
Yeah.
I will do
Like,
that.
in that list that I sent you, if you have questions about it, like some specifics, hey, what did you mean by this?
Honestly,
do
what's
that
going to
for
happen, the listeners, the viewers are going to have 1,000 questions that I will forward to you.
Cool.
So,
Yeah, send me a link to that, that you're, so that I can take a look.
oh,
Because
absolutely.
it sounds great.
Okay.
This is really fun. I enjoyed it.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate your time. If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, please consider supporting my Patreon at patreon.com/Savitz. I've been publishing interviews like these since 2013 and would like to continue doing so for a long time, and your financial support will help. Thanks.